When the sheriff showed up at my door at 6 in the morning holding an eviction notice printed in Comic Sans, I knew I'd either woken up in the wrong universe or the HOA had finally lost its mind. I mean, picture this, me still in my old college t-shirt and pajama pants, sipping coffee in my kitchen, enjoying the sunrise, when the doorbell rings 3 times in a row, followed by a knock hard enough to rattle the glass. I put the mug down, figured maybe someone's dog got loose again or the Johnsons needed a hand, but when I peeked out, there's Deputy Martinez looking every bit as confused as I felt, clutching paperwork that just screamed, "Not my circus, not my monkeys." He holds up the eviction notice, stares at it, stares at me back at the paper, and you could tell he was wrestling with whether to laugh or stay official. The whole thing was so amateur. It hurt Comic Sans' weird legalese about mandatory housing sharing protocols. And apparently I was now supposed to vacate my own home within 24 hours. It was signed by Glenda Marsh, our illustrious HOA president, and, as it turned out, aspiring property redistributor. Martinez cleared his throat and asked, "Are you Ethan Rowe?" I showed him my license. He just shook his head and muttered, "Strangest call in 15 years. Then he handed me the notice and quietly suggested I call a lawyer, not because he thought I was in trouble, but because someone bold enough to pull this stunt was probably going to try something even dumber. As his cruiser rolled away, I caught curtains twitching up and down the street. Cypress Hollow's grapevine was about to light up. But here's the thing, this wasn't even the beginning. This was just the latest round in a fight I never wanted. So let me back up a sec, introduce myself proper. I'm Ethan Rowe, 35 network security consultant, mostly working from home, which means I know the quirks of my 3-bed, 2-bath ranch house better than anyone should. When I bought in, it was for the quiet, friendly, but not nosy neighbors, enough space for a little workshop in the garage, barbecue Sundays, and a backyard just big enough for a vegetable patch and to lose a soccer ball. The HOA seemed chill enough at first. Basic rules, nothing wild. I'd lived under HOAs before, so I knew the drill. Keep the grass cut, don't leave the bins out, pay your dues on time, and they leave you alone. At least that's what I thought before I met Glenda. Glenda Marsh had been HOA president longer than anyone could remember, not because people liked her, but because nobody else wanted the job. Think, 1950s secretary meets drill sergeant hair sprayed into a helmet, always in blazers, drove a white SUV she parked like she was drawing property lines. First time she showed up at my door, she handed me a welcome packet 3-ring binder with HOA rules plus her own best practices, complete with a color chart for acceptable flowers, a page on doormat slogans, nothing political or funny, and buried way in the back her community resource sharing initiative. According to Glenda, spare bedrooms shouldn't just sit empty. She wrote that they could be community assets for board meetings, guests of neighbors, even emergency shelter. Sounded more like a cult manifesto than a rule book, but I just thanked her, closed the door, and got back to my day. Did I go to the first few HOA meetings? Nope. Between work and not wanting to debate bird feeder locations or which blinds counted as neutral, I skipped. Turns out Glenda kept score. That was mistake number 1. The little invasions, started small bins, rearranged my hose, wound up differently. Notes in the mailbox about my porch light being on too late or the lawn needing attention. I shrugged it off at first, but when the friendly visits began, Glenda knocking for random excuses, wanting to check my contact info or see if I'd read her latest newsletter, I got wary. Once she asked to use my bathroom, then got lost and peeked into my spare bedroom. I caught her, and she claimed confusion, but the look in her eye said otherwise. The real trouble kicked off when she started showing up in my backyard phone out taking pictures of my bushes. Documenting landscaping violations, she said, because my Alia shrubs were apparently 3 inches over regulation. I told her flat out to leave. She huffed, but she left, and that night I put up security cameras. The next weeks, she walked my property lines with her clipboard sometimes 3 times a week, jotting notes, snapping photos, but never crossing the line. Technically. Still, the violation notices ramped up grass too long by half-an-inch trash cans, angled wrong solar lights, not approved model. Each fine was 25 or 50 bucks, not enough to fight, but enough to annoy. I started documenting everything, figuring I'd need proof sooner or later. Then came the Friday that changed everything. I'd barely finished a brutal work week and was settling in for pizza and a movie when the bell rang. This time, Glenda was standing there with 2 suitcases, a cardboard box, and her cousin Leonard, both looking like they'd booked a weird Airbnb. Glenda grinned, flashed a laminated badge reading HOA Guest Housing Program Pilot, and told me she was implementing the new Community Housing Share Program. Leonard, it turned out, needed a place for 2 weeks while his house was being fumigated. Guess whose spare bedroom she'd volunteered? For a split second, I wondered if I was on some hidden camera show. I told her no program, no guests, no way. She insisted the HOA had approved it at the last meeting, which I'd missed, shocker, and that all the documentation was at the HOA office, which I later learned was her basement desk. Leonard tried to back out, but Glenda dug in, lecturing me about community responsibility and how I was everything wrong with modern society. I pointed to the cameras, said I'd call the cops, and watched her dignity flicker between rage and wounded pride. As she left, she spat over her shoulder that people like me were destroying the neighborhood and that the board would be reviewing my fitness to live there. I closed the door and laughed. Mistake number 2. Glenda didn't just want compliance, she wanted submission. That weekend I trimmed my shrubs to regulation, brought in the bins early, and even kept my barbecue with friends low-key. But Monday morning I found a stack of neon orange violation notices taped to my door house, hoarding failure to provide communal lodging, hostile environment for board members, each with a hefty fine, and a grainy zoom lens photo of me shutting the door on Glenda. $600 total, due in 30 days. I called my buddy James, a real estate attorney. After he stopped laughing, he told me to document everything and not pay a cent. Glenda doubled down, posting on the neighborhood app about selfish newcomers, pushing her innovative guest housing program, and calling for the community to unite against antisocial elements. Neighbors were split, most confused, a handful egging her on others. Quietly thought she'd lost it. The next day, a for rent sign appeared in my yard with Glenda's phone number and a listing for my spare bedroom. The Patels next door started avoiding eye contact. The Johnsons muttered about how HOA presidents used to just care about lawns. James sent Glenda a cease and desist letter delivered by process server. I thought that'd end it. Nope. Thursday, it got wild. A couple showed up with an Airbnb confirmation and a code for my front door, which obviously didn't work. Glenda had posted my guest room online using pictures she'd taken that day she got lost on the bathroom run. I felt terrible for them, helped them get a refund, but that was the last straw. James called the police. Before I could even make it to the station, I got an email from the HOA Glenda, as the board calling an emergency meeting to decide my fate. Apparently, I was now guilty of tax evasion, running an illegal Airbnb, and sabotaging community initiatives. I showed up to the meeting with James in tow. Glenda had set up charts, a PowerPoint about resource hoarding, and even cited Soviet communal apartments as inspiration. It was a spectacle. When she got to the part about me, James stood up cool as a cucumber and introduced himself as my attorney. The room got quiet. He dismantled Glenda's arguments point by point, presented evidence of her trespassing the fake Airbnb, and threatened civil and criminal charges. Chaos broke out. A vote was called 28-2. Glenda was booted as HOA president on the spot. If you think that was the end, you haven't met a true believer. Next morning, a moving truck showed up, Glenda's stuff ready to be delivered. She'd told the movers she was moving into my guest room under HOA authority. She'd faked documents, forged my signature, even invented new bylaws overnight. I called the police. Officer Chen took one look at her paperwork, asked if she'd made it herself, and when she proudly said yes, placed her under arrest for fraud and attempted breaking and entering. She screamed about lawsuits and conspiracies as they drove her away. But the dam had finally burst. Turns out Glinda had tried similar stunts before other neighborhoods, other petty crusades. The fraud unit got involved, uncovered a whole web of fake Airbnb rentals, forged county paperwork, and embezzled HOA funds. At trial, her defense was basically that she was a misunderstood visionary. But the judge wasn't buying it. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, $40,000 restitution, a lifetime ban from HOA boards, and best of all, was ordered to spend her probation living in actual public housing sharing space, just like she'd tried to force on us. The neighborhood changed overnight. The new board reined in the rules, held meetings in a circle instead of behind podiums, and made all documents public. People started talking again, grilling together, even laughing about the bedroom wars. Every year we have a barbecue on the anniversary of Glinda's arrest, more about community than revenge. But the cake does usually say justice served. The story spread cautionary tale in law schools, memes online, even a documentary that played up the suburban dystopia angle. Some ask if I regret not just letting Leonard stay that first night. Would it have stopped all this? No way. You give a bully an inch, they take a mile in your spare bedroom, your peace, your dignity. The real lesson: stand your ground, document everything, and never let anyone, no matter how official they seem, convince you to give up your basic rights. So here's my call to action. Have you ever dealt with a neighbor or HOA gone off the rails? Where do you draw the line between community and control? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share your stories. Let's keep each other honest. Because believe me, you never really know what's behind the next knock on your door, or what font the eviction notice will be in.